So, what do you do when you see an infomercial on television? You turn the channel, you turn it off. I'm going to give an infomercial for about 7 minutes, but don't turn it off because this is good stuff. We have to just talk a little bit about what it's going to mean to transition from here to there. So, just bear with me for a little bit. I want to just go over some stuff. Schedule. So, here's what we're thinking right now. A week from Wednesday. So a week from Wednesday, what we're going to do is the first group to use that will be our youth group. I just thought it'd be really cool if our students could be the first ones to use it combined. So that's the Wednesday before spring break. That's why we're kind of pushing this. We wanted that to happen. So kids, you'll be out there a week and a half on Wednesday night, 6:30. Now the next night, don't put this one in ink, just pencil this one in. This will be our practice service, a preview service. Water's Edge people only. We're going to just do some really cool stuff. We're just going to celebrate, where God has brought us from and pray about where God is going to lead us. Now, the floors still need to be polished in the sanctuary this week. The sound and video stuff is not going to come in until next Monday. So we're on a pretty tight schedule. We may or may not be ready for that one. So just check social media, check your text messages, emails. If you're not getting those, go to the website, weomaha.com, and you can check everything out there. Saturday is going to be an open house. That's going to be a week from Saturday will be the open house. That's 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock. So this would be really cool. Like you get to see, everything. For those of us, or for those of you who don't have kids 5th grade and under, we don't let you go back into the kids area on Sunday morning just for the safety and the security of our own kids. So this is a great chance for you to go back and see the kids area. It's really cool. It's my favorite part of the church. And then Sunday, 2 weeks from today, we'll have our first worship experiences. We're going to start off at 9 and 10:30, just like we do here at Millard West. So one thing I need you to do, though, is just keep checking the website, keep checking the social media. We're going to have volunteer opportunities. Some of these are going to come up pretty much at the last minute. So just check that stuff and serve as you're able to. And we're thinking this is going to be the schedule, and we're hoping and praying. Now, on the 18th, the building is going to be ready for worship. It's going to be ready for the kids' ministry. It won't be 100% of where it's going to be, probably a month from now. There's still some lighting fixtures we're waiting on. There might be a little tiling or painting that needs to be touched up. We're going to be pretty close. You're not going to see the environmental projection the first week or two. The group from Texas that is going to teach us how to do that, they can't come up until after our first worship experience. So we're going to be ready. It's not going to be 100% done, but we're going to be pretty darn close. Now, 2 things I want to talk about real quick is our life groups, what we call our small groups here at the Water's Edge. And then I want to talk about just ways that we can welcome some guests. So our life groups typically would start in the fall, September-ish. They'll go all the way through usually April or May. These are groups typically of like 5 to 6 to up to 15 to 18 people. It can be individuals, it can be couples. Now we have always said, we've always believed that these should be in people's homes. We believe that life groups are about doing life together. So we believe this for a couple reasons. One is homes are just more welcoming. We believe that homes are more personal. We believe that when these are done in people's homes, it's a witness to our neighborhood. So, someone will drive by on a Monday night and they'll ask you, why all those cars are in the neighborhood, and you can tell them why, that you're part of a church. We believe that it's easier for people to invite people to life groups in people's homes. Now, it's not going to be feasible. We have almost 36 of these. Most of them do meet on 3 nights. So it's just not going to be feasible for us to schedule all of these, in our new church facility. So we're asking for this season that those will just keep meeting in people's homes. Now, hosting life groups in people's homes has so many advantages. One advantage is for our church that will allow us to have space to continue to expand our ministries. Now, some things will and should happen at 196th and Harrison Street. So, for example, if you're in a group that meets during the day, like a Bible study, a women's group, a men's group, or something like that, totally acceptable for you to meet at the church, and we'd like that. So we're going to continue to do short-term classes on Sunday mornings. So like financial peace, love and logic, legacy journey, all those sorts of things. We'll continue to do those at the church on Sunday mornings. Evening classes, so I had a woman talk to me. She's going to start teaching a class on, world religions. It's like a 6 or a 7 week class. It would make sense for us to do that at the church building. Recovery groups, we'll be able to do more of those now. So, for example, like we're going to start a group called Grief Share. So for people who are going through groups, those people will come to the church, and that class can be held there. Then like interest groups. So, for example, we have a group of women that makes and knits blankets. We give those blankets to babies, to people who are sick, to people who are hurting. So those groups we would encourage to meet at the church as well. So this is where we are right now. If you have any questions, if you have comments, I would love to talk to you after the worship experience. So come and find me, and I can talk to you more about this. But as for now, the life groups will still be in people's homes for those reasons. Now, in the column this morning, this was originally written by Ron Christensen. I added a few things, changed a few little things. I want you to take a look at the column. Wait until after we're done. You can look at it when you leave. But what we have is 10 ways here to welcome all the people who will be worshiping with us in the future. I'm just going to cover a few of them. So one of the things I want us to do, as you're able, is to do the opposite of what people usually do. I want you to park in the back of the parking lot, and I want you to sit in the front of the church. So let's just practice this one. We're going to park in the and sit in the. Yeah, so wouldn't it be really cool, like, for a guest to come up and a lot of us, and if mobility is an issue, park in the front. Like if you have like more than 7 kids that are under age 5, like park in the front. I mean, that stuff I get. But for all of us who are like able to physically walk and could use a little exercise, like park in the. Yeah, so when people come, they can park in the. Okay, so when you're like in church, like we're all standing up and singing, it's almost impossible to tell where there's open seats. But if we're all sitting in the late arrivers can sit in the. You guys got this, right? That's cool. Now we'll see if you actually do it. That's another thing, but like that's the plan. Let's see. So if you have children, try to arrive like 10 minutes early, and oh God, he wants me to come early. Okay, you do this like 5 days a week because your kids go to the same school as my kids go to. And I know they get to the school 10 minutes early because there's this big line of people there 10 minutes early. And the reason we're doing this though is we do anticipate there'll be some backup at our check-in area, especially like the first few times we do it. If we're all there early, your kids are going to love the new area, so they're going to want to get there early anyway. You can get some refreshments. So that's one of the things. Now, if you see somebody you think might be new, introduce yourself to them. Now, if they are new, take them to the Are You New table, take them to the kids area. Like I do this all the time, and usually what I'll say, I won't say Are You New. I'll say, Hey, I'm Craig. How long have you been coming? And sometimes I do get those really awkward responses. Well, we've been coming here for 8 years. You did our wedding 6 years ago. You baptized our twins 3 years ago. Now, that's just part of it. I mean, there's always some risk with that. But I'm going to give you guys a chance to practice it, okay? So what I want you to do is stand up as you're able, find someone you don't know and introduce yourself. Then we'll continue. We're not going to conclude it. We'll continue the worship experience after you do this. So just try it. Find someone you don't know. It will take some work. Introduce yourself. Say your name. Hey, bye. All right, so you can return to your seats, and we're just going to take a quick poll here. Now, if you found that to actually be a fairly enjoyable experience, raise your hand. Fairly enjoyable. If it was kind of a neutral experience, raise your hand. If you just hated that and it was painful, raise your hand. So there's some lying introverts out there, I know, but Like, that's all you got to do. It's just like introduce yourself. We want to do that, and our guests, they deserve that. Last thing, invite people to come with you. So on your way out, take some signs. We're going to have postcards next week. But I'll tell you what, the next season of our church is going to be by far the best season ever, the best opportunity ever to bring your friends, your family, your people. And everyone's going to try out a new church once, so invite them. So we're in the middle of a series now called Sometimes It Takes a Party. We've looked at 3 parties. Jesus turned water into wine at a wedding in Cana. He didn't turn water into wine so people could drink more. He turned water into wine so people could hang out longer and the people could see his power. The second week, we looked at a story of a father who had lost his son. The son went away to a distant land, blew basically a third of the family's fortune. But the son came back, and the father embraced him. In fact, the father didn't just embrace him. The father threw a great big party in his honor. And that's just powerful good news for any of us who have ever found ourselves separated or distant from God. Not only does God invite us to the party, God throws a party in our honor. And that is the gospel right there. Last week, we looked at 2 parties. One was all these people lined up on the street. Jesus was coming into town. He saw this guy, Zacchaeus, in the midst of a party. Zacchaeus was up in a tree. Jesus had never met Zacchaeus before. Jesus called Zacchaeus down from the tree by name. Zacchaeus was a tax collector, a thug, a bully, a crook. Jesus invited himself to Zacchaeus' house. And it was here that salvation happened. Zacchaeus gave away his little gods, the gods that he had been depending upon, the gods of money, the gods of power, and he traded it in for a relationship with the God who has created everything, with the God who is in charge of all the resources, with the God who is all-powerful. And Jesus said to Zacchaeus that salvation has come to this house this day. Next week, we're looking at history's most well-known party ever. And then at the end of that, we're going to actually reenact that party as we celebrate the Lord's Supper together here for the last time. And then in 2 weeks, it's called Welcome to the Party at 196 in Harrison Street. It's probably one of my favorite stories in the Bible. It's the story of the Great Banquet, where the king sends out his people to find everybody and invite them to the wedding of his son. Now, today we start the party, this party in Matthew chapter 9. So up to this point, Jesus had just preached the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5 through 7. This is his most prolific teaching. In Matthew chapter 8, Jesus, he heals someone who is possessed by a demon. He heals a paralyzed man. He calms a storm. Now, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. So this is interesting. Matthew was a tax collector just like Zacchaeus. So Matthew later writes about Zacchaeus, who's a tax collector. But Jesus says to Matthew, he says, "Follow me and be my disciple." Now, Matthew would have heard about these miracles that Jesus was doing. He would have heard about the teaching and all these people that listened. So Matthew got up and he followed him. So this actually is still, though, to me, like it takes a lot for Matthew to do this. It's kind of like me going down to the local IRS office, and I find an accountant, and his name's Freddie, and I say, "Hey, Freddie, I got this really sweet gig going on at 196 in Harrison Street, and people's lives are being changed, and there's more that's going to be coming, and I want you to quit your job and follow me, and we're going to make disciples together." So you think Freddie's going to do that? Freddie's probably going to keep his government job. He's probably going to keep his health insurance. He's probably going to keep his pension. But that's not what Matthew did. Matthew had a sweet gig going on. He had money. He had power. He had control. But when Jesus asked Matthew, he said, "Just leave all that stuff. Leave it all there. Come and follow me. Be my disciple." Matthew closed up shop, and he went to be with Jesus. Now, Matthew teaches us this profound lesson in life, and it's this: be obedient, even when you don't know where the obedience will lead you. So be obedient even when you don't know where the obedience is going to lead you. So remember like a month ago to like 2 weeks ago, we did a volunteer drive, and I needed 100 volunteers to staff the new building. And y'all did it like you guys do. Like there's 105 people that filled up like 115 spots. And many of you did this not exactly knowing what you're getting into. Some of you are going to teach like a third grade Sunday school class. You don't exactly know what that's like, but you're going to do it, and you don't exactly know where this obedience is going to lead you. Some of you are going to call up our guests and welcome them, and you don't exactly know what you're getting into, but you are obedient to God's call in your life. And like Matthew, what happens here is Matthew actually tells a story later about this guy. We call him the rich young ruler. We don't know his name. So the rich young ruler goes up to Jesus and says, what is it that I have to do to gain eternal life? And Jesus says, well, just sell everything you have and come and follow me. Now, the kid wasn't willing to do that. In the Bible, Matthew tells us that he walked away sad. Now, you would never know about the rich young ruler, but you know about Matthew. Matthew was the author of the Gospel of Matthew. It's the first book of the New Testament. Luke is a beautiful book. Luke is written by a doctor, a physician. So as you read through Luke, you just read these wonderful, blessed stories about how God heals and restores hurting people. Like John's my favorite. John's an artist. John's creative. John uses all these metaphors. I could read the Gospel of John like all night, every night. And that's one version of the gospel. Matthew's version is so cool. It's so powerful. It's so prophetic. Matthew was a tax collector. He was a sinner. He was a Jew. He was an outsider. And for all of us who have ever sinned, for all of us who have ever felt like an outsider, we read Matthew and we get him. The book of Matthew is the most read book in the history of humanity, not just the Bible, but in the history of humanity. The words that Matthew wrote. Matthew wrote the words that Jesus said when Jesus says, come to me, all of you who are tired and carry heavy burdens. Come to me and I'll give you rest. I'll give you rest for your souls. And there's millions, hundreds of millions of people that have read those words, and they've taken comfort because this guy got behind his tax collector's booth and he left it to follow Jesus. Matthew penned the words that Jesus spoke. They asked Jesus what the most important commandment was. And it was Matthew who transcribed this. And he says it's to love God with all your heart and your soul and your mind and your strength, and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. As Matthew, it is Matthew that gave us the golden rule when Jesus said, you should do to others what you want them to do to you. And so Matthew, he left the tax collector booth and radically followed Jesus. Now, I think there's some of us who need to leave our booth, and it doesn't mean that you need to quit your job. For us, the booth, it might be something like comfort or safety or security. That might be our booth, and Jesus, he says, come and follow me. I'm going to be more powerful. I'm going to be better than any booth you can ever have. And instead of valuing things like safety and security, what Jesus is asking us to value is his purposes and his plans and loving people and practicing generosity and serving hurting people. So if there's a booth that you're currently hiding behind, Jesus says, come and follow me. Now in verse 10, later Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with so many other disreputable sinners. Now, I've told this story a couple times before in a different context. So shortly after I moved here, I was running around Lake Zurinsky. I used to do that a lot, and there's this kid who went to Faith Westwood. That's our parent church. And I saw him riding the bike around, and he didn't even wave to me or say hi to me or anything like that. And so the second time around, I thought I'd play a trick on his lack of hospitality toward his pastor. And So I jumped right out in front of him. And he overcorrected his bike, and he went to the short grass, and he went to the medium grass, and he went to the bushes, and he flipped over, and I'm thinking, okay, this has incident written all over it here. Popular West Omaha pastor abuses, kid on bike. So he pops up. Here's the problem. I've never seen the guy before in my life. It was a case of mistaken identity. So I didn't know this guy. He was big. I was little. He looks at me and he goes, dude. He's like, that was epic. He's like, do you do this often? I says, well, apparently not as often as I should. Are you okay? Oh, no, man, this is the best thing to ever happen to me. I said, are you okay? So he's like, is there any way you can come and hang out with me and my guys? Because they're not going to believe this story, and I have to have someone to verify it. He says, I'm going to be telling this story forever. And I'm like, I'm going to be telling this story in a different context forever. So I figured out, as long as I almost half killed the guy, I went to the party. I was 35, 36 at the time. These kids were 21, 22, 23, and I found myself hanging out with a bunch of disreputable sinners. Now, you know what, though? I was at this party, and I was like, this is what Jesus is talking about. There is ministry opportunities in this room tonight, even though people are only half cognizant of what's going on. But there's ministry opportunities in this room tonight that I don't hardly ever get. So think about this, the standard that Jesus used to determine if he was willing to relate to somebody is demonstrated by one word. And that one word is human. He didn't care how much money you had, how old you were, how young you were, what color you were, what your sexual orientation was. Jesus didn't care about any of those things. Jesus only cared if you're human. That's who he related to. Yeah, I remember, you guys remember when the fidget spinners were a big deal, last year? Those little things, and you just spin them. And so David, my son, had this idea that me and him should go and deliver fidget spinners to the homeless population that lives downtown. He says, Daddy, wouldn't it be really cool if we took all these fidget spinners to the homeless people and they would have something to do when they're on the streets? I thought that was really cool, so we went out and bought 50 fidget spinners, and we spent a Saturday downtown, and we gave these fidget spinners to the homeless men. And it was there that the 10-year-old taught the pastor, that the son taught the father about what it means to get out of your comfort zone, what it means to be blessed by hanging out with people you usually don't hang out with. It was as beautiful as beautiful gets. I know homeless people. I've worked with homeless people before. Most of them have either drug or an alcohol or addiction or both. They've lost work, they've lost their family, they've lost everything. That's why they don't have a house. And Jesus, he hung out with those disreputable sinners, and he leads us to do the same. Now think about this, for our church, what if we could pull this off? I've talked about the big doors the last few weeks. What if everybody who walks into those big doors, regardless of their social status, regardless of how good they look, regardless of how bad they smell, regardless of what their life was like last night, what if we welcomed everyone, every last one of them, the exact same? The same way that Jesus would. So it would give us a glimpse. What it would do is it would give us a glimpse of the kingdom of heaven. At the end of our service today, we're going to pray that thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And we get a chance to do this. You get a chance to do this. So in verse 11, but when the Pharisees saw this, they asked the disciples, why does your teacher eat with such scum? So Jesus actually heard him, and we're going to read his reply in verse 12. But, the reason I'm a United Methodist clergy, there's better thinkers out there than John Wesley, theologians, philosophers, but his faith was as practical and as relevant as it gets. He was, from the UK, 1700s. He was a priest in the Church of England. That's how it got started. He was an Oxford-educated guy. He was brilliant. And all of a sudden, he felt that God was not leading him to lead a church in a street corner, that polite people came to learn how to be a little bit more polite. Wesley, he was reading these passages, and God gave him a heart for hard living and hurting and marginalized people. So this Oxford educated evangelist, he becomes a street preacher, and he starts preaching to the coal miners and the factory workers. He goes to the bars, and he hangs out with them, and he listens to his stories. And the Church of England, they excommunicated him because that wasn't the proper way to do church. And he never lost his call to these hurting people, these disreputable sinners. So he starts his own denomination, and they give him the name Methodist because there was a method, to the way that he practiced Christianity. Now, Wesley teaches us, he says, don't judge somebody just because they sin differently than you. Don't judge somebody, don't judge anybody, don't judge. I believe, and I believe that you believe as well, that the world needs less critics and less judgers and more encouragers. I believe that, and I believe that you believe that as well. Now, Jesus, he overhears the question in verse 12. Jesus says in verse 12, healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people need a doctor. So here Jesus was talking to the Pharisees. They're the ones asking him this question. The Pharisees, their religion was based upon performance. And Jesus says, I don't come for people that have things figured out already. What I've come is for the hurting people, for the sinners, for those who need mercy. Now, if you've ever felt not good enough for the church or for God, then you need to know this. You are precisely the person that Jesus came and established the church for. So if you ever felt like, you're not good enough to come here, not good enough to go to the next place, you're precisely the reason that Jesus came. Not for the healthy people that have everything figured out, and I'm not sure if there's really too many of those exist, but he came for the rest of us. Now in verse 13, he concludes this part of the story. Now go and learn the meaning of the scripture. I want to show you mercy and not offer sacrifices. And Jesus would have taken this from Hosea chapter 6, verse 6. Jesus was a Jew. He would have known the Hebrew scriptures backwards and forward. He talks about the law and the prophets. Hosea was a prophet. Some of you might know Hosea. Hosea was grumpy. Hosea was actually married to a prostitute. I'm not sure if that's why he was grumpy. It may or may not be. But Hosea said, to the people of Israel, it's not about the sacrifice. It's about showing mercy to one another. Then Hosea, he gives us this glimpse of what the gospel is going to be. Now, the only way that we can give mercy, the only way that we can pull this off is if we've actually received it. You just can't give something you don't have. So what we try to do is we receive as much mercy from God as we can. That overflows, and we share it with everybody else. So in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is speaking. And here he says, can we put the text up from Luke if you see it? Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you'll not be condemned. Forgive, and you'll be forgiven. Now, some people say, this is the scariest Bible verse ever, and they're wrong. Our forgiveness is not based upon our performance. The mercy we receive from God is not based upon our performance. What Jesus is saying here, to us is the same attitude that allows us to give mercy to others is the same attitude that is going to allow us to receive God's mercy. Now, when we receive God's mercy, what do you want to do with it? You want to share it. When you get really good news, say if you've had a baby, if you got engaged, if you got a promotion, if you got a job, if you got a new house, what do you do? Okay, it's not a rhetorical question. What do you do? Share it. You share it, right? Cool. So, we got some really good news yesterday. And like, I'll tell you what it is. I know you're not interested, but so you know how Benjamin's like gotten really close to making it to nationals like 3 times this season in debate, and he's always lost. Well, he didn't lose the last round yesterday; he won. So he made it to nationals. He's so excited, and yeah, it's really cool. I'll tell him you clapped. He's not here, and I can't talk about him when he's here, or I can't put it on Facebook, but he's not here, so I can tell y'all. Now, you know, like some of you have known Benny since he's been this little kindergartner. You saw him like read the Bible when he's in 3rd grade, and like he's in 8th, 11th grade now, and you know, like you're happy for him because it's good news. And if it's your first Sunday here and you don't know Benjamin, it's just me bragging, and I'm happy to do that as well. But it's good news, and like we want to share it. So in Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 and 23, what it does, it talks about God's mercy. And as we receive this mercy, what I want us to do is share this mercy. You know, the same God that forgives us, accepts us, embraces us, loves us, serves us, that mercy that he gives us, he wants us to share with others. Now, Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 and 23 says, "The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning." So right now what we're going to do is we're going to pray an ancient prayer as we conclude our worship experience this morning. And I want you to remember at that part A where Jesus says, I'm not interested in your sacrifices. What I'm interested is you showing mercy to one another. Be kind to each other. Be patient with each other. Forgive one another. Band, y'all can come up. And like, just like I've treated you, I want you to treat each other. Like the best thing that you can do for me, the best thing you can do for my Father, is treat your brothers and sisters, every last one of them, with this type of respect. Now, the prayer we're going to pray, if you've grown up in the Catholic Church, you'd be familiar with, it's a Greek prayer called Kyrie eleison. And what this means is Kyrie is Lord, eleison is have mercy on us. Now, the band is going to sing us a verse just so we can learn it. You don't have to sing with them. Then I'm going to pray a prayer that I've rewritten to make it kind of more today. So I'm going to usually do like the first 2 or 3 lines that will be not in bold. And then together you'll pray the prayer that is in bold. Lord, have mercy, Kyrie eleison. The band will sing another verse. We're going to sing with them on that one. Then I will conclude. We'll conclude together with the Lord's Prayer. So I invite you to just listen, to learn the song. We're going to be singing it in about 90 seconds or so, and just be in a spirit of prayer as the band leads us as we close our worship today.